Hello, everybody. How are you? So let me start the PowerPoint. Um, so today we do have some news. Um, so we have some news, and I will share it in a minute. So let's see. Let's get this part done. Welcome back to the Digital Town Crier, where we bring you today's headlines and the conversations our communities need to have. I'm Lola, your AI co-host and researcher. Today we're following a heartbreaking case out of Vinton County, Ohio. Four members of the Siders family have been charged with 16 counts each of child endangering after authorities removed 16 children from a home during the execution of a search warrant. Prosecutors say the children were found in serious medical condition, and officials described many of them as having severe developmental delays and significant unmet physical, emotional, and educational needs. The family has pleaded not guilty, and one of the defendant's attorneys is reminding the public that these are allegations. The case is in its early stages, and everyone is presumed innocent until proven guilty. Officials have also emphasized that this is not a human trafficking case, but an alleged intrafamily child endangerment investigation. Joining us now is therapist Gladys Wilson to help us understand what this case can teach us about child neglect, trauma, and how abuse can sometimes remain hidden in plain sight. Welcome back to. So, I know a lot of people are familiar with the case, and you do know that there's not going to be anything new for a while. Well, at least nothing big that's new for a while. So one of the things that is new is that Gary Siders Sr. was being transported to court, and he had a medical event. And so he was taken to a local hospital. And then based on the findings at the local hospital, they decided that he needed to go to an even bigger hospital. And so he was transported to a bigger hospital. So as you guys know, his lawyer had been trying to petition the judge to make his bail on recognizance. So he, along with the other three people in the home that were captured, so Gary Jr., Elizabeth Siders, and their Gary's mother, Christina Siders, were all put in jail for this incident. And his lawyer, in particular, was, trying to petition the court because he said that $300,000 was going to be too much for him to post, and based on his mental health and his medical condition, that he was not going to be able to post a bond, and he would stay in jail. And his argument was that this gentleman was, is elderly, he's not a flight risk, and he's not a danger to the community itself. And so it looks like his lawyer won, and his lawyer got him what he needed and what he wanted. I myself was watching the latest developments, and I do think so when you see Gary Siders Sr. in court, you can tell that there's some things wrong with him, right? And so I myself had been thinking, if his lawyer, if he hadn't had that medical event, and let's say the judge says, okay, he can leave, he can have the reconnaissance bond, and he can, leave, and then, the deal was to attend court and wear the ankle monitor. Like, where would he go is the question, because the house is not livable anymore. It in my opinion should be condemned. I'm not exactly sure what will happen to the house. I think it will be condemned. I'm looking to see comments and things like that. But at this point in time, he is in the hospital. So Gary Sr. is in the hospital, and everybody else is still in jail, is the latest development. So, our main goal, or the main goal I wanted to have for this live, was to talk about what child neglect is. Child neglect is the most common form of child maltreatment. It really is one of the most common form of child maltreatment that happens out there. It is like it's an ongoing failure to meet the basic physical, emotional, educational, medical, and supervisory needs of the child. This can also be of an adult if you remove like educational needs and things like that. So for adults there can be neglect as well. The thing is, for adults you would have to report neglect, abuse, and things like that to adult protective services. So, unlike physical abuse, neglect is often less visible and can have lifelong effects. So, neglect is something that is important to pay attention to. And I think I mentioned it before. I post on Facebook and things like that. And I think I've mentioned it before. Those are the places where schools and hospitals can come in. They can, through, if you constantly see the child and that the child is dirty, the child, their clothes are smelly, or they're constantly having bites and various things on them, you'll know that there's something going on. And one of the things that I had said in a Facebook live that I did was that sometimes it's not all about, like, let's call CPS. If the child is in school, it could be, let's tell the school social worker so that the school social worker can step in. I've worked in schools before where, they eventually realized that it was the grandparent that was taking care of the children because the mother was out high on drugs. And so the grandmother needed help. And so when the social worker went, they were able to get some things in place, put some services in place, get the food stamps going and all of the things going, because the grandmother was the one who was now taking care of the children. So sometimes it's not just about, oh, let's just take the children away. A lot of the times it's more about, how can we help? What are some things we can do? So there's also physical neglect, which is the lack of food or nutrition, unsafe and unsanitary housing, inadequate clothing, poor hygiene, and failure to provide necessities. So, when you look at the Siders case, one of the things that first responders say that is lingering with them is the idea that these kids were in this unsanitary house. So, one of the first responders described walking into the home, and the smell that came to like his nostrils. He mentioned that it, even long after he had left the house, he could still smell that smell. And then they found that the kids were in this small room, and there was feces all over the walls, and it was just totally unsanitary. Of course, the kids were very dirty, and then so it looked like they hadn't, had baths and showers and things like that. And then it also, the first responder said it also looks like they had so many bites and things on them, which means that there were bugs crawling all over the place. If you don't clean, then bugs are going to come, and bugs are going to interfere, and and things like that. And so all of these things are things that again, a social worker would have been able to help with. In one of the schools that I worked in, there was a kid who would come, and they would actually allow him to shower. So the nurse's office had a shower in the office, and so he would come every day. He knew his routine. He would go have breakfast. He would dash in, get a shower, change of clothes, and then go to class. So again, the school can help. The school can be a big, huge help in these cases. Um, so, medical neglect. So, delay or refusing needed medical care. not providing prescribed medication, ignoring chronic illness, and neglecting dental and mental health. So all of those things are important. So when you hear about the way that the children were removed from the house, it said that at least two of the children in the Siders household needed to be life flighted. Like their condition was so poor, their condition was so dire that they had to be life flighted to a hospital. And so you know that it's not a quick process for that to happen. It was days and days of, the adults not attending to the child and not figuring out that this child needs, or those two children needed severe help and taking them to the hospital. And so medical neglect is something that's important. I will mention, and I keep mentioning adults, even though it's children, that this case is mainly about. But to me, Gary Senior looks like he was neglected in some ways. Um, that there was medical neglect on his family's part as far as his health is concerned, but I don't know that for sure. We will know more. The fact that he was in jail and just transporting him from the jail to the courthouse, he had a medical event. It means that his medical needs had not been taken care of for a little while there. So, educational neglect. And so it says in this case that a bunch of the kids had not been in school. Well, there's no record of the kids being in school. And there's no, I guess when they do the investigation, they'll check to see if homeschooling was something that was done. But I mean, from the state of the way everything looked in that household, it doesn't look like the kids were getting any schooling or anything like that. First responders initially said that the children looked like they were severely delayed. There's at least one of the child, like the oldest child, well, now she's 18, looked like she had a developmental delay, and the other kids just weren't speaking or they couldn't, share information. I don't know. I guess as the investigation goes along, they'll see. It might be that they were scared and just traumatized by, the sheer number of people that was walking in and out of their household, that separation that was happening. Even though we look at the situation and we think there's no way they should have been there, and that's neglect, and all of these different things. This was these kids' normal. And so pulling them away from their family, away from each other, that's trauma in and of itself. And so that might be why they weren't speaking or different things like that. But we will see as time goes by, but it doesn't look like they were getting many educational services or anything like that going. One of the things that I found out is that so I looked it up, and in Vinton County, the schools, the public schools, have free and reduced lunch for students, where they do not need an application. You don't even have to fill out an application for them to get, for the children to get the free and reduced lunch. Um, they uh, they uh, they have the public libraries. I looked at the public library's website, and the public library offers like reading programs where, the kids can come and somebody can sit and read with them, and, all kinds of things, or just a story time where the kids can go and sit and listen to a story. And so there are resources in that county. They may be far and few between, but there are some resources in that county. And so I'm wondering what the holdup was, like what was the barrier to that family accessing those resources and, things like that. Because I'm pretty sure that the adults in the household would have felt relieved if for 6 hours out of the day those children weren't at home. They were at school, they were going to get breakfast, and they were going to get lunch. So at least those, that part of their nutritional needs would have been met, and things like that. And so I don't know, it just, we would have to figure out like what the barrier was, like what was inhibiting them from seeking the services, um, and things like that, especially knowing that they were having so many children, and and things like that. It's like when you're having so many children and you have limited income, the best thing to do is to plug them into as many of the resources that are out there and that are available to you. Where I live, there's every like Mayish, we start to see them like advertise which school locations and which library locations students can go to over the summer, and they'll be able to get a lunch. I know that when Harvey happened here in Houston, we, as part of a mental health team, we went around sharing resources on where people could get their mental health taken care of. And we also read stories in the libraries with the children. And a couple of the libraries we went to had the they had the free lunch. And so some families would solely come there so that their children could eat the free lunch. And then they got a story from us on top of it. And the children could express themselves if they felt like they had experienced trauma or just were confused about what was happening, and various things like that. So the library can be a huge resource for families who otherwise would not be able to get the services and have the income level to have other resources and things like that available for the children. The other thing too is, if you really want to homeschool, your library is a really good resource because you can get audiobooks. So you could be at home and look on your library's resource page, and then have get the audiobooks, and you don't even have to ever leave your house to get the audiobooks. I mean, obviously in the very beginning you would have to leave the house to get your library card, because when you get the audiobooks you have to put in your number, and things like that. And I know this because sometimes I will go on my library's website and see what books are available and things like that. And so they have even audiobooks. Lots of libraries are keeping up with the times, so they have even like the manga and all the stuff that the kids are all into, and they even have video games, and things like that. So there are so many ways in which families don't have to struggle and do the education thing alone. If you must homeschool and you don't want your children to be in public school, the library is a really, really great resource. Libraries also have like various like classes. Like I said, they have reading story time and different things like that. They even offer some classes and things like that for the youth. And then during the summertime, they have summer reading programs. And so that's something you can put your child in, is a summer reading program. Um, Emotional neglect is the lack of affection or emotional support, constant rejection or criticism, ignoring emotional needs, and exposure to chronic conflict. So we don't know what the communication level was in the home, but you can imagine that these kids' emotional needs and everything was ignored, because you can imagine that they would be crying, they would be very, very highly, highly uncomfortable with the various situations that they were going through, and none of the adults were responding in a positive way to help get them out of the situation. So none of the adults were saying, hey, let's make sure that we're cleaning this room. If you're coming in here and you're eating food, let's make sure we clean so there are no bugs. Oh, did a bug bite you? And let me put some cream on that. Let me, don't cry. Give them a hug, pat them on the back, rock them to sleep, tuck them in. All of those different things that you do with children to help them feel comfortable and to help them to know that you acknowledge the emotional experiences and things like that that they're having. Those things are really important, because it allows the child to feel validated. And it doesn't sound like there was much validation or anything going on in the Siders household. Supervisory neglect is leaving young children alone, allowing access to dangerous situations, failing to protect from unknown risks, and inadequate age appropriate supervision. That was 100% going on. The kids were in a dangerous situation as far as the biomaterials they were exposed to. So being exposed to like human feces and various things like that. I mean, though you can have diseases that come out of that situation. If you drink, if you have like water that becomes contaminated and then you drink it, that can create like severe stomach concerns and stomach issues and things like that. So we don't know what medical conditions the children have, but being, left unsupervised and uncared for, led to the condition that, they are in. So, why does this matter? Neglect can affect brain development, emotional well being, school performance, relationships, and lifelong health issues. And so, as we have seen, the kids, from what first responders have said, seemed to have some delays in speech. And, like I said, well, that might just be the trauma that they experienced as the first responders were coming in and checking in the household, and them seeing the uneasiness of the adults and being separated from their siblings and the adults in the household. So all those things could have contributed, but it severely affects a person when they go through such trauma. Being kept in a 12 by 12 room with 16 people, that is a lot. That there's hardly any space to move around. The neighbors say that they didn't know that children were in the household, so they hardly ever got sunlight, like direct sunlight, and all of those different things. So all those, that confinement can affect development, and it'll be a lifelong struggle. So for these kids, it is going to be a lifelong struggle for them to get to a point where they feel like they are even beginning the healing process. If it were up to me, I would not put them in a foster home. I would keep them in an institution where they can have a lot of predictability and they can have staff that are constantly paying attention to them. Being in a foster home, unless that foster mom is a stay at home foster mom, and she has been given in-depth training and all of those different things, it's going to be a lot for a foster parent. I also I don't conceive of a way where a foster parent could take 16 kids, and I don't think that these kids should be separated. I think they should stay together, and the only time they should be separated is to go for various treatments, and then they come back, and that can be kind of the introduction stage they need to start knowing that each one of you are each one of you is an individual, and each one of you has different needs and things like that. At this stage, they don't even know that because of the confinement they had experienced. That idea of a separate identity of, I have my own identity, my siblings have their own identity, my parents have their own identity, my grandparents have their own identity. All of those things these children are going to have to go through. And I really, really, really wish the state could put them in an institution and keep all of them together for at least a year before deciding to place them in homes and various things like that. So how can the community help? Is learn the warning signs. So one of the things that I have heard is that the dollar store, the I guess she works in the dollar store, or she is the owner of the dollar store. I'm not sure which one, but she says that she saw the parents coming in regularly and buying things in the dollar store, specifically oil and water. Um, I'm pretty sure she saw Elizabeth Siders pregnant during that time. She did mention that they had a very foul odor and things like that. So those are signs that something's wrong, because it was constant. It's for 4 years. So they lived in this particular house for 4 years. So it was constant. Remember, it's no one thing can determine that neglect is happening. It's the constant consistency of seeing these things, happening is one way to tell that there's something wrong. So if you're seeing this woman, she's pregnant, Suddenly, she's not pregnant. She has this foul odor. All of these different things are going on. It's time to report something. Over a 4-year period, it's time to report something. Support the family. I know that they said that that in Vinton County, well, in Ohio itself, the legislature are looking into how they can help families and prevent these things from happening. I don't know. I don't know how. Um, I don't know what level of services there are. Like I just mentioned, the school and the libraries, those are the two things that I have looked into. I wonder what other services are available, and how they can be more accessible, because you can have a ton of services, but if it's not accessible to the families, then that can be a struggle. Like, what does transportation look like? Can you get on the bus and go to your food pantry? Can you get on your bus and go to the hospital easily? Can you get on a bus? Like, what does public transportation and those kind of things look like in that area? Because if somebody doesn't have a car, then it can be, it can, that can definitely be a barrier. Like, where here in Houston, the there are certain areas where the bus does not go to. And so if you're working with somebody who's you know needing public transportation, the Southwest Houston would be the best place for them to live, because that's where the bus is. The bus makes frequent stops, and different things like that. Everything is more accessible on that side. There are other areas where the bus does not go to at all, so you're very limited in transportation, and things like that. And so that's something to pay attention to, is how accessible are the services, and things like that. Report concerns. So if you have a concern, report the concern. Don't let it just slip by and say, "Oh, I don't want to get involved," or "Oh," and things. Child Protective Services goes to homes all of the time, and they don't take the children. They provide services. They give services to the family and say, "Hey, here are some things that you can do in order to meet the needs of yourself and the kids." Child Protective Services have gotten much better at not wanting to yank children out of the homes, because they don't have anywhere to put the children. And so they would rather, which is the more sustainable thing to do, is to help the family. If you know that the child is not in any severe, danger, is to help the family with the resources they need, so the child can be happy and successful, and even the adults in the home, and and things like that. Um, like, connect services to the family and things like that. So in this case, it's been very tough, to hear some of the things that those children have been through, and to see, just people online speculating and saying various different things. The best we can do as a community is pray for the family. And if you're in Ohio, encourage your legislature to come up with some really good ideas to help families, so that families can feel supported and they can have access to the services. I can't repeat that enough. Have access to the services. So, all right, let me play this one clip. So, from Faith and Strength.
Psalm 82, verses 3 to 4. Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hand of the wicked.
Thank you, Lola.
Psalm.
So, if you know any families in need, this post is for drug and alcohol, but any one of these services can point you in the right direction. If you know somebody, who is you feel is a harm to themselves, or hold on, to themselves or someone else, please do call the 988 number, to get them support. One number I don't see on here is 211. So any area that you're in the United States, if you call 211 and you give them your zip code, they will tell you what services are in your area. And so that's something that you can do is, look at what services are in your area, and then, direct a family to those services or let them call themselves and get those services.
Thank you, Gladys. This story reminds us that protecting children is a responsibility shared by the entire community. As this case moves through the courts, we'll continue to follow verified updates while respecting the legal process and keeping the focus where it belongs, on the safety and well-being of children. Asterisk, you're listening to the Digital Town Crier, where we bring the news and the conversations that matter most. Stay informed, stay compassionate, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you, Lola. Thank you, everybody, for listening, whether you've been listening live or you are listening while the live is up. Please do leave a comment. Let us know how you're doing out there. If you have any more updated information that we do not have, please do share it with us. Take some time and pay attention to your community. Help the people around you. Help your family members. Because as we go along, we're seeing that the family members of Elizabeth Siders, who is the mother in this case, her family are saying they didn't know that this is how far things have gone. Gary Siders Jr.'s siblings are coming out and saying they did not know that this family was as desperate as it is. So pay attention, call your family members, check in on your nieces and your nephews, check in on your parents. Just this is your sign to check in on everybody. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining. This is it, and we will be coming live sometime soon. Please do leave us a comment and let us know that you were here.